Well, good morning, everyone. A familiar face sits before us. Welcome. I'm going to ask you to introduce who's the fellow sitting next to you, Mr. Reagan, on your left.
Our EPA budget director.
No, what's he doing here? All right, the top
Chief
question.
Financial Officer, I should clarify.
Good.
Chief Financial Officer.
We'll see if his lips move when you speak. How's that? Well, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to call this hearing to order and to join Senator Capito in welcoming back Administrator Michael Regan before our committee to discuss President Biden's fiscal year 2024 budget proposal for the Environmental Protection Agency. I think it was about 2 years or so ago that you sat pretty much right here, and I'm trying to remember who was sitting right behind you in the audience, right behind you. There's a young guy. He looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. What's his name? Matthew?
The superstar of the Regan family, Matthew.
Yeah. I want to just say, we got a couple of new members on our team. Some of you will recall, he was the best behaved 8 or 9 year old kid I've ever seen in my life. So I think we said later on, Shelley and I were talking, we thought you probably had him medicated in order to be able to behave that well.
No, just the promise of a lot of Pokemon cards.
Whatever it takes, whatever it takes. We're happy to welcome you back today to discuss President Biden's fiscal year 2024 budget proposal for the Environmental Protection Agency. Over the years, I've often said that budgets are about priorities, or as the late Jim Frock once said. Anybody ever heard of Jim Frock? Probably not. But you've heard him say, you heard the saying is, don't tell me where your priorities are. Show me where you spend your money, and I'll tell you what they are. Jim Frock. And rest in peace, Jim Frock, wherever you are. But you're gone but not forgotten. But budget proposals are an opportunity for our presidents, Democrats, Republicans, and others as well, to lay out a forward-looking vision for the people of our country. And I believe that President Biden's $12 billion budget request for EPA, after years of starving the agency for years, prioritize now the needs of the American people. At this moment in history, Americans want a well-resourced EPA that takes action to protect our health and our environment, especially when tragic accidents occur like the recent Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Communities throughout the U.S. that are overburdened by legacy pollution want a well-resourced EPA that works to clean up the air they breathe and the water they drink, as well as the contaminated land, which, if cleaned up, could be used for economic development and job creation. And those of us who are concerned about the future of our planet, and that's just about all of us, want a well-resourced EPA that takes strong action to combat the greatest threat we face today on this planet, and that's our climate crisis, while at the same time creating millions of new jobs in the process. Earlier this week, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its latest report underscoring the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As many of us here know today, climate change is already impacting communities across our country, large and small. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, extreme weather fueled by climate change in the form of hurricanes, flooding, drought, and wildfires cost American taxpayers nearly $170 billion in 2022. That's it, $170 billion in 2022. That's billion with a B. And to put that figure into perspective, that's about 14 times the size of your budget, Mr. Regan, at EPA. Fortunately, last Congress, we worked to pass the American Rescue Plan, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act. My thanks to everyone who's worked on one or more of those bills. In doing so, we have directed EPA to do more than ever before to tackle climate change, address pollution, and protect your health in a way that supports economic growth. I'm a recovering governor. We had a couple of others here under the recovering governors. I'm always looking for how do we support economic growth and job creation. It's never far from my mind, and it is especially here in my mind today. But how, you may ask? Well, we've tasked EPA with overseeing historic investments in clean drinking water, free of contaminants like PFAS and lead. We've also invested in EPA's work to clean up legacy pollution from contaminated urban brownfields, abandoned wells leaking methane, acid mines leaching heavy metals, and more. And we have empowered EPA to help build a clean energy economy made here in America, with good-paying jobs and lower energy costs for households across our nation. The President's budget would build on our legislative progress by providing EPA with the resources it needs to implement these new programs that Congress has created. Among them are the Clean School Bus Program, the Methane Emission Reduction Program, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and new investments in wastewater facilities, all while continuing the important work of carrying out our nation's bedrock environmental laws. Make no mistake, the agency truly needs these investments. It's no secret that EPA has not always received the resources, at least in the last decade or so, the resources required to be successful. In recent years, flat budgets and staffing shortages have severely undermined the agency's ability to do its job in many respects. As EPA's responsibilities and workload continues to grow in the face of climate change and other human-caused environmental disasters, it should come as no surprise that the agency is overburdened. That's especially true when we look at the agency's workforce. EPA's current number of staff, that's about 15,000, is well below the range of 16,000 to 18,000 that the agency had from 1990 through 2012, below the range we had in 2012. For the years, we've asked the EPA to do more with less, much less. Unfortunately, instead of proposing to slash the agency's budget further, as the previous administration did, President Biden's budget proposal would increase the EPA's budget by roughly 19% in fiscal year 2024 as compared to the previous year. It's really a leveling up where we ought to be if we had not cut the budget so much. The increase in funding under the President's budget for EPA is necessary as the agency works to rebuild itself and address emerging and ongoing challenges. It's also worth noting that the President's budget would add nearly 2,000 full-time career staff at EPA. Staff levels either have been cut in recent years or are actually frozen. And at the same time, we think your workload has increased dramatically. But these additional staff would make a real difference in the agency's ability to do things like manage toxic chemicals under the Toxic Substance Control Act, which we passed with a big bipartisan vote in this committee a number of years ago, but it's not being fully implemented because of the lack of staff at EPA to do that. Other things that need to be done is to convert contaminated brownfields. Almost everybody on this committee can think of brownfields in our states that are contaminated and it could be turned into areas for economic opportunity. And also, we need to replace a bunch of lead pipes throughout our country and probably throughout every state that's represented on this committee. I'm also pleased that EPA's budget would make good on President Biden's Justice 40 initiative and ensure that all Americans, including those in historically overlooked and underserved communities, receive their fair share of federal assistance from EPA. As co-founder of the Senate Environmental Justice Caucus, I'm particularly grateful that this budget focuses on the need of our most vulnerable communities of color, as well as low-income American Indians and Alaskan Native communities. I call them the least of these. It is something that I know that you, Mr. Reagan, continue to prioritize as well, along with the folks you lead. You should know that many members of this panel, including me, support your efforts to advance environmental justice. Indeed, we have a moral obligation to do so. Let me close by saying that I believe President Biden's budget represents a brighter vision of the future for our nation, all of our nation, from coast to coast. One that delivers on the promise of cleaner air and cleaner water in every zip code, and better ensures that every American has an opportunity to live up to the God-given potential. So, Administrator Reagan, I know we're heading in that direction thanks to your outstanding leadership at EPA and the work of the team that you're privileged to lead during an especially challenging time in our nation's history. We look forward to hearing your testimony today and to the responses that you'll give to the questions that we'll be posing. Before I do that, I'm happy and delighted to turn to our ranking member, Senator Capito, for her opening remarks. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr.